They told you that sympathy makes you human. They lied. Sympathy doesn't elevate you. It exposes you. In this quiet war of masks and motives, it is the scent that gives your position away. Sympathy is not a virtue in the game of power. It's a flare in the night sky, signaling manipulators, parasites, and emotional tacticians to close in. The world doesn't reward the kind. It rewards those who can appear kind without being vulnerable to it. From the moment you could speak, they trained you. Clap for the sad. Comfort the broken. Feel their pain like it's your own. And for a while, it worked. You were accepted, praised, loved. But love is cheap currency. In a world built on hierarchy, you weren't being taught virtue. You were being programmed for obedience. Predators don't need to overpower the strong. They only need the strong to hesitate. And sympathy is hesitation dressed as decency. The guilt it installs is a leash. It pulls you toward obligations that aren't yours. You give time to those who drain you. You make exceptions for those who sabotage you. They cry, and you soften. They suffer, and you serve. They fail, and you pay. Sympathy isn't just a feeling. It's a behavioral trigger, a lever by which your defenses are bypassed, your logic blurred, and your strategy dismantled. And the manipulators? They know this. They bleed on command. They tremble when cornered. They recount their traumas like currency, knowing that your humanity will respond on cue. But power isn't found in reaction. It's found in precision, and precision dies where sympathy lives. Start here. Track when you feel sympathy, not with judgment, but with scrutiny. Your emotions are data. Use them to identify the threats hiding behind helplessness. Every time you feel pulled toward someone's pain, stop. Don't speak. Don't act. Pause. And ask one question. Who benefits if I care? If the answer isn't you, then your compassion is being weaponized. Train for emotional detachment, not cruelty. Control. You don't have to be cold on the outside, but inside, you must become untouchable. Learn the cold pause, that split second of silence where your instincts are checked, where your mind overrides the pull of pity, where you choose observation over reaction. Because once you speak from sympathy, you've already surrendered the frame. Machiavelli warned, "He who seeks to be loved must prepare to be used, because love without control becomes a liability." And sympathy? It's just love with open wounds. In a world of tacticians, it is not cruelty that kills the naive. It's their belief that kindness protects them. But in the next moment, I'll show you how the weak engineer your sympathy, not as a mistake, but as a strategy. Prepare to see guilt as a trap set by those who know exactly where your heart lives. Not all predators are strong. Some hide behind tears, behind trembling voices, behind stories told just loud enough to make sure you hear them. Weakness, when weaponized, is not innocent. It's precise, calculated. It doesn't seek help. It seeks control. Because when the weak realize they can't dominate you with force, they dominate you with emotion. According to Machiavelli, he who cannot be feared must be pitied. But both are tools. He understood what most never do, that pity can be engineered. And the weak, they've turned it into an art form. You see it in relationships. The partner who collapses when caught lying. The sibling who breaks down only when confronted. The friend who spirals. Every time you set a boundary, none of it is accidental. They're not losing control. They're using it. Their chaos is staged. Their fragility, timed. Every outburst is a move. Every breakdown is leverage. They don't need strength. They need your reaction. Sympathy is their currency. Your discomfort is their weapon. They've learned that if they suffer publicly enough, you'll bend, you'll stay. Apologize, compensate. They twist guilt into gravity and pull you back in. And here's the cost. You stop trusting your instincts. You doubt your anger. You delay your exits. You let their pain take precedence over your perception. But your clarity must not be for sale. The true manipulation isn't in their words. It's in their timing. They don't unravel until power slips from their hands. They don't panic until you reclaim control. And if you look closely, you'll notice their tears only fall when you're about to walk away. Their voice only cracks when the consequences finally arrive. This is not emotion. It's strategy masked as vulnerability. So what do you do? First, adopt the role of the silent analyst. You don't comfort. You don't console. You observe coldly. Study the pattern. Do their collapses follow confrontation? Does their sadness spike when accountability is near? Second, enforce silence. Not on them, on yourself. Let the performance hang in the air like fog. Don't cut it. Don't clear it. Just watch. Your stillness becomes their stage light. And most manipulators crumble when their act receives no applause. Third, hold your frame. If they break down, let them. But you don't move. You don't soften. You speak only when truth, not performance, fills the room again. Because when you react, you give them control. But when you pause, you keep the crown. Machiavelli advised, compassion must be calculated, not compulsive. If your kindness isn't under your control, it's under someone else's. And once the weak learn that they can direct your emotions, they will do it again and again and again. But now you see the stage. And in the next breath, I'll show you how sympathy, once weaponized, doesn't just manipulate, it infects. It spreads into your decisions, into your posture, into the way you ask for what you once owned. Next, you'll learn how to turn that infection into immunity. When you sympathize publicly, you're not being kind. You're broadcasting your emotional weak points to a crowd that includes your enemies. Every sigh, every soft glance, every word of comfort is a confession disguised as kindness. Machiavelli said, "The mask of mercy invites the knife." He understood that emotion, once displayed, becomes a map. And predators never stop reading maps. Sympathy reveals where you can be manipulated. It tells the world what you fear to lose, who you'd rush to protect, and where your control begins to fracture. Every time you rescue, you declare your thresholds. Every time you cry for someone else, you teach the world how to make you cry again. The dangerous ones don't announce themselves. They don't attack in noise or haste. They watch. They collect data. They study your tone when you comfort others, the micro-hesitations in your breath, the way your eyes soften when pain enters the room. They don't need to wound you now. They just need to know how. Predators live on emotional reconnaissance. They track warmth like a heat signature. They listen for the tremor that betrays care. Because once they know what touches you, they can control what moves you. Sympathy is their invitation. It tells them that you'll bend under guilt, that you'll pay in attention, time, or loyalty if they can only make you feel responsible. You've seen it. The colleague who shares their struggles just before deadlines. The friend who becomes helpless only when they need a favor. The lover who weaponizes tears the moment you pull away. They're not seeking connection. They're seeking leverage. You think you're offering comfort, but you're handing over intelligence. To those who think strategically, emotion is reconnaissance. Your sympathy becomes a code they can exploit, and every time you react, you confirm its accuracy. This is why powerful people rarely reveal what moves them. They can speak of empathy, but they don't display it. They understand that sympathy, like scent, travels farther than words, and once released, it cannot be retrieved. You must learn what they know. First, control your displays. Power requires selective visibility. Your emotions are assets, and assets must be guarded, not gifted. If something moves you, let it do so in private. In public, remain composed. Stillness is not indifference. It's strategy. Second, study your reflexes. Who makes you want to fix, rescue, or comfort? Who always seems to need your emotional energy most? Audit these moments like a tactician. Patterns of pity often reveal patterns of manipulation. Third, respond with clarity, not compassion. When you're drawn into someone's chaos, replace warmth with observation. Ask for facts, not feelings. The manipulator thrives on emotional fog, but clarity suffocates them. Your goal is not to appear heartless. It's to remain unreadable, because the unreadable are untouchable. Let your silence disturb them. Let your composure make them second-guess their performance. Power doesn't always come from what you say, but from what you withhold. The less they know about what moves you, the more they fear what you might do. Machiavelli warned, "He who reveals his heart invites others to hold it." Restraint is protection. Detachment is armor. When others lose themselves to emotion, you must become the mirror, reflecting everything, absorbing nothing. That is how you become impossible to profile, impossible to predict, and therefore impossible to control. Because in a world where everyone is bleeding to prove they care, the one who remains composed becomes the one they all obey. In the next moment, you'll see how sympathy doesn't just make you visible, it makes you pliable. How emotion, once exposed, can be redirected until your instincts serve someone else's will. And by the time you notice, your compassion will already be working for your enemy. You didn't help because you cared. You helped because guilt dragged you by the throat. That's not compassion. That's captivity. That's how sympathy mutates into emotional servitude. What begins as softness ends in submission. You think you're choosing to care, but your nervous system has already been hijacked. Guilt is not a moral compass. It's a weaponized version of sympathy, engineered to override your instincts, to paralyze your clarity, to rewrite your identity as a rescuer, even when it kills you. According to Machiavelli, the one who controls your shame controls your sword, because guilt doesn't need to shout. It only needs to whisper in the right place. Manipulators understand this. They don't bark demands. They suggest. They don't accuse. They express disappointment. "I thought you were better than this. I didn't expect you to walk away." They sigh. They go silent. They make their withdrawal feel like a punishment. And your body reacts. You lean forward. You justify. You offer, not because you agree, but because the silence unsettles you more than the sacrifice. That silence isn't absence. It's a stimulus. It's emotional conditioning, a Pavlovian punishment designed to rewire your behavior. And it works. You obey, not out of conviction, but from a fear that non-compliance makes you cruel, that distance makes you heartless, that defending your boundaries makes you the villain. This is how guilt replaces logic, how strategy is drowned in emotional reflex. They don't have to control you directly. They just need you to question whether saying no makes you a bad person. And the moment that question enters your mind, you've already lost the frame. So what do? First, master emotional redirection. When guilt arises, do not suppress it. Study it, dissect it, trace it to its source, like a crime scene. Ask yourself, who benefits if I feel guilty right now? What do they gain if I break my stance? Is this guilt earned or installed? This dissection kills its power because guilt thrives in fog, but clarity is its suffocation. Second, re-anchor to self-interest. In moments of emotional pressure, speak to yourself in sharpened phrases, mantras that reframe your role. Say, my peace is not collateral. I own nothing but silence. Their disappointment is not my responsibility. These phrases don't just sound strong. They sever emotional strings. They re-establish your posture, tall, still, unshaken. Third, retrain your nervous system to recognize manipulation as noise. When the silence comes, when the sighs arrive, when the eyes say you failed them, don't move. Stillness is resistance. Silence is your weapon. Let them feel the absence of your obedience. Because if you break every time guilt knocks, you were never free. Machiavelli warned, the mind that bends for guilt forgets how to stand. And he was right. Because guilt doesn't demand force, only your compliance. And once you give it, they'll never stop taking. But in the next breath, you'll learn how to reverse this equation, how to infect them with discomfort, how to speak in a tone that makes their guilt activate, how to turn their expectation into hesitation. Once they label you the nice one, the exploitation begins, and it never ends until you end it. They don't exploit you because you're weak. They exploit you because you've been identified as someone who won't resist. That's not an accident. It's a role, one you were cast into. The moment you showed sympathy in public, being perceived as sympathetic is an invitation to chaos, not because you feel, but because others see you as someone who will feel on command. It's not your heart they want. It's your predictability. You become the default responder, the unspoken therapist, the one they can call at midnight, the one who always understands, the one who never retaliates. You become their cushion for failure, betrayal, neglect, and they don't even have to ask. Your kindness becomes an expectation, not a gesture. And then the trap tightens, because the moment you don't help, the moment you set a boundary, decline a favor, or stop showing up, you're not neutral. You're cruel. You're cold. You're not who they thought you were. But that was never your image. It was the one they built around your silence, and it served them until it didn't. Sympathetic people are assigned archetypes: the fixer, the caretaker, the emotional sponge. They're handed scripts that demand suffering in silence, with grace, and without retaliation. You're expected to absorb inconvenience like air, to take guilt as your portion, to bend when others break. And if you dare shift, if you speak with spine, if you stop serving, you are punished socially. They'll withdraw warmth. They'll circulate whispers. They'll frame your strength as betrayal. Because your sympathy wasn't just a trait, it was a utility. And now, you're non-compliant. Machiavelli said, "It is better to break a reputation than be buried by it," because any identity built to please others becomes a weapon in their hands. So here's your extraction strategy. First, destroy the persona systematically, publicly, deliberately. In safe, low-risk environments, start breaking the script. Decline requests without justification. Say no without explanations. Let the silence after your refusal do the work. Second, use emotional contrast as disruption. Don't gradually change. Drop the softness in one move. People recalibrate faster when the shift is sharp. Their confusion works in your favor. It resets their expectations. Third, become selectively inaccessible. Don't be available on demand. Don't respond out of reflex. Let your delay become a message. Access to you is no longer assumed. It must be earned. And fourth, monitor reactions without apology. When they question your distance, don't defend. When they guilt you, don't explain. When they call you different, nod. You are different. You've stopped being a character in their script. This is how you reclaim authorship. Not through rage, but through refusal. When others begin to question your capacity for sympathy, you are no longer seen as a resource. You are seen as a variable, and variables are harder to control. The moment they hesitate before asking you, you've won. Because the strongest boundary isn't what you say, it's who they believe you now are. In the next breath, I'll show you how to use that hesitation, how to build a presence that doesn't just repel exploitation, but reverses it. You'll learn to trigger guilt in those who once fed on yours, to use perception as pressure, and to make them feel the cost of ever labeling you again. Machiavelli never once praised pity. He praised results. He admired clarity. He warned against the illusion of virtue, because illusions invite betrayal. In a world ruled by perception, pity has no place. Sympathy clouds decisions. It turns rulers into servants. And in the game of power, hesitation is the first sign of death. Machiavelli advised, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." Not because fear is noble, but because it keeps your control intact when love begins to rot. He understood something the modern world forgets. Power is not about kindness. It's about command, and command dissolves the moment you feel sorry for those you must manage, confront, or remove. Pity pulls your hand back when you need to strike. It ties your logic to their emotion. It makes you compromise where clarity demands cruelty. And cruelty, not in form but in precision, is often what separates survivors from casualties. Look closely at how power operates. A leader who pities begins to stall. They hesitate before punishing betrayal. They delay cuts to protect feelings. They let loyalty to the wrong people linger too long. And that delay becomes decay. Sympathy seduces you into seeing people as fragile. But fragility, when overestimated, becomes manipulation. The people you pity learn to weaponize your softness. They bleed just enough to keep your sword sheathed. They suffer just loud enough to distort your judgment. You think you're leading with empathy, but you're being led by it. Machiavelli's writings cut through this. He taught that appearance matters more than intention. You must seem just, appear compassionate, but your decisions, your real moves, must be forged in distance. The strong ruler observes pain and makes decisions anyway, because pain is not the measure of worth. Effectiveness is. So how do you adapt this? First, adopt selective presentation. Let the world see warmth in your tone, not in your choices. Be kind in posture, but steel underneath. Your face is a mask, one that smiles when needed, but never lets emotion dictate consequence. Second, study cold command. Look to those who held power not through force, but through emotional distance. Historical tacticians who maintained dominance by staying detached from drama, crisis, and pleas. Read not for inspiration, read for behavioral patterns. What they concealed, what they delayed, what they refused to justify. Third, remove apology from your strategy. Never explain calculated decisions through emotion. Say, It had to be done. Not, I feel bad about it, because the moment you show guilt, you validate their pain as leverage. A true strategist leads with an unshakable frame, one that absorbs emotion without reacting to it, one that recognizes that morality and manipulation often wear the same face. According to Machiavelli, fortune favors the cold hand because it's the cold hand that delivers consequences without trembling. In the next moment, you'll learn how to weaponize that coldness, not just to protect your power, but to project it. How to speak, act, and move in ways that make even the manipulators hesitate. How to become a presence that replaces pity with pressure. Feel nothing at first. That's your shield. Detachment is not cruelty. It's clarity, and clarity protects power. Machiavelli said, "Impulse leads princes to ruin. Restraint builds empires." Because the first emotion is rarely truth. It's bait before you speak, before you act, before you decide. Detach. Emotional pressure is where most people forfeit control, not because they're weak, but because they're rushed. They confuse urgency with importance. They believe the moment demands their reaction. But in power, immediacy is exposure, and exposure invites manipulation. You don't owe anyone your instant reaction, not your explanation, not your emotion, not your response. Power players understand this. They delay. They create gaps between stimulus and response, gaps filled with analysis, not instinct. When confronted, they don't flare. They withdraw, not out of fear, but out of strategy. Their silence isn't absence. It's preparation. While others spiral, they observe. They let emotional heat burn out so they can move through the ashes with precision. This is the posture of control, one that resists provocation, one that never reveals its center. And this posture is learned, rehearsed, installed. So install it. Start by building a delay protocol, a structured response system to emotional pressure. First, exit the field. When emotions spike, pause the room. Say nothing. Leave. If needed, say, "I'll get back to you." Then disappear. Second, extend your silence. Let the urgency expire. Delay your decision by hours or days. The longer you wait, the clearer the manipulation becomes. Third, deprogram the reflex to please. When someone pressures you for a quick answer, they are not seeking clarity. They're seeking compliance. Don't give it. Delay becomes dominance. Fourth, make detachment your default. Practice it in low-stakes environments. Ignore unnecessary notifications. Respond on your own time. Detach emotionally from what doesn't align with your goals. Over time, this becomes instinct, and instinct becomes armor. When your first move is nothing, you become impossible to bait. When your delay becomes habit, others will begin to fear your silence. Because silence implies depth, and depth makes people hesitate. That hesitation is your leverage. Use it. According to Machiavelli, he who cannot pause cannot rule, because the ruler's greatest weapon is not the sword. It's the moment of stillness before it strikes. So from this point forward, adopt this final law. Detach first. Decide later. Not for peace, but for power. Because the one who controls their response controls the outcome. And the one who waits always sees more